Just as the organ's first thunderous chord filled St. Michael's Cathedral, Celeste Darren realized her entire world was a lie. At the very moment she was poised to say, "I do," she'd uncovered her fiancé's torrid affair with her own mother, and instead of walking down the aisle into a fairy tale, she was about to unleash a truth so explosive it would shatter two families, ruin reputations, and redefine what it means to choose yourself over everyone else's comfort. The organ's deep notes reverberated through St. Michael's Cathedral as I stood at the altar, my hands trembling against the ivory silk of my wedding dress. 200 faces stared back at me. Friends, family, colleagues, all waiting for the moment I would become Mrs. Nathaniel Reed. The late morning sun streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbow shadows across the marble floor. But my heart wasn't racing with joy. It was hammering with a terrible, crushing knowledge that threatened to split me in two. Behind the sea of expectant faces, I could see my mother in the front pew, her emerald dress perfectly coordinated, her smile radiant. 24 hours ago, I would have believed that smile. 24 hours ago, I still lived in a world where mothers protected their daughters, and love meant something sacred. Nathaniel squeezed my hand, his blue eyes warm with what I had once believed was devotion. "You ready for this, Celeste?" he whispered, his voice carrying that familiar confidence that had first drawn me to him 3 years ago. I looked into his face, the sharp jawline I'd traced with my fingers, the mouth that had promised me forever, and felt my world crystallize into perfect, terrible clarity. "Oh, I'm ready," I whispered back, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. "More ready than you know." 3 months earlier, I had been blissfully, foolishly happy. My name is Celeste Marianne Darren, and at 28, I believed I had everything figured out. I was the daughter my parents had always dreamed of. Graduated summa cum laude from Georgetown with a degree in literature, worked as a senior editor at Meridian Publishing, and had just gotten engaged to Nathaniel Reed, the golden boy of our community. Our engagement had been a fairy tale. Nathaniel, 31 and devastatingly handsome, was the son of Judge Harrison Reed and philanthropist Victoria Reed. He worked as a corporate attorney at one of DC's most prestigious firms, drove a BMW, and had proposed to me at the Kennedy Center during intermission of Swan Lake, my favorite ballet. "You're going to have such a beautiful life together," my mother had gushed that night, admiring the 2-carat diamond ring that caught the light like captured starfire. "The Reeds are such a prominent family. You've done well, sweetheart." I should have caught the way she said it. Not, "You'll be happy," or "He's perfect for you," but "You've done well," as if I'd completed some sort of transaction rather than found my soulmate. My father, Pastor William Darren, had been more reserved but equally pleased. He'd built his reputation on family values and traditional morals, and seeing his only daughter marry into such a respected family felt like a blessing on everything he'd preached for 30 years. "Nathaniel is a good man," Dad had said, pulling me into one of his warm, enveloping hugs after dinner that night. "I can see how much he loves you, Celeste. And more importantly, I can see how much you love him." The word love would taste like poison on my tongue only weeks later. The wedding planning consumed the next 2 months. My mother threw herself into the preparations with an intensity that both touched and exhausted me. She insisted on handling every detail, the flowers, the catering, the music, even my dress fittings. "This is every mother's dream," she'd say, flipping through magazines and making endless phone calls. I was grateful for her involvement, even when she occasionally overruled my preferences. When I suggested wildflowers for the bouquet, she insisted on white roses and peonies. When I wanted a simple string quartet, she booked a full orchestra. When I mentioned writing my own vows, she convinced me traditional vows were more elegant. "Trust me, darling," she'd say with that smile I'd inherited. "Mother knows best." Nathaniel seemed amused by our family dynamics. He often dropped by unannounced, charming my parents with stories from his law firm and compliments about my mother's cooking. He and Diana would spend long minutes in the kitchen together while I finished work calls or graded manuscripts, their laughter drifting through our colonial-style house like music. "Your mother is remarkable," he told me one evening as we walked through Meridian Park, the same path where he'd first asked me to be his girlfriend. She's so devoted to making sure everything is perfect for us. She's always been like that, I replied, squeezing his hand. When I was little, she'd spend weeks preparing for my birthday parties. Every detail had to be flawless, and they always were, I'm sure. He stopped walking and turned to face me, his hands framing my face. "You're perfect," he said. I should have wondered why he spent so much time talking about my mother. I should have questioned the way his eyes lingered on her when she laughed, or how he always seemed to know exactly which wine would make her light up with delight. I was so in love, and love, I was beginning to learn, makes us spectacularly blind. The first crack appeared 3 weeks before the wedding. I had stopped by my parents' house after work to finalize seating arrangements. Arms full of RSVP cards, laptop bag heavy with manuscripts. The house was unusually quiet when I let myself in through the front door. "Mom, Dad," I called, setting my bags down in the foyer. From the kitchen came a breathless, almost flustered sweetheart, but there was something different about her tone. I found my mother at the sink, washing dishes that looked suspiciously clean. Her dark hair, usually perfectly styled, was mussed, and when she turned around, her cheeks were flushed pink. "Oh, Celeste, honey, I didn't expect you so early." "It's 6:30, I said, checking my watch. "Same time I always come on Wednesdays." Of course, of course." She dried her hands on a dish towel, avoiding my eyes. I sat at the kitchen island with the RSVP cards. "How was your day, darling?" she asked. I almost let it go. Almost accepted her lie. But then I noticed the coffee mug on the counter, one of our good china cups, still warm. "Mom, whose mug is this?" She tensed. "Oh, that's mine. I only drink tea in the evening, but I was feeling tired." The lie sat between us like a live wire. My mother had never been a good liar. Her tells were as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. But I loved her, and I trusted her, so I chose to believe. "Okay," I said simply. "Let's figure out these seating arrangements." That evening proceeded normally, but something had shifted. I caught her glancing at her phone constantly, her fingers tapping anxiously against the counter. When Nathaniel texted me around 8 to say he was working late, I noticed her entire body relax. A week later, second crack, Nathaniel had been distant, claiming work was overwhelming him. He'd canceled our usual Thursday dinner twice and missed our cake tasting appointment. When I called his office, his secretary said he'd left early. I drove to his Georgetown apartment, a sleek high-rise whose doorman knew me by name. His car was in the garage. I knocked on his door, then used my key when there was no answer. "Nathaniel, are you okay?" The apartment was dark. On the coffee table sat a single wine glass, the rim smeared with lipstick in a shade I didn't recognize. Strange. He never locked his bedroom door, yet now it was firmly shut. From behind the door came his voice, muffled. "I'm not feeling well, Celeste. Food poisoning." I pressed my ear to the wood, torn between concern and suspicion. I chose trust. "Feel better," I said into the silence. "I love you." "Love you too," he whispered, unconvincing. 2 days before the wedding, the truth came flooding in. My phone rang, my mother's number. "Celeste, darling, I need a favor." She'd left some wedding programs in her Mercedes. Could I swing by and grab them? Of course. The drive to my childhood home took 20 minutes. The security gate clicked open when I used my key. I slipped into the passenger seat of my mother's Mercedes and reached for the manila envelope. But something caught my eye. A small black leather notebook with my name on the cover, in my mother's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened. It, page after page, detailed the slow, deliberate seduction of my fiancé by my mother. Entries logged secret meetings, stolen kisses, and the electric thrill my mother felt at being desired again. The final entry was dated yesterday. "Tomorrow night, the night before the wedding, he's coming over while William is at his meeting, our last time together before Celeste becomes his wife." The notebook slipped from my fingers. My world tilted sideways. I checked into the Willard Intercontinental under a false name, paid cash, and told the desk clerk I was surprising my husband for our anniversary. In my hotel room, I spread the notebook, screenshots of credit card statements, and a list of every sign I'd missed across the king-sized bed. Then I called my assistant at Meridian Publishing. Jenna, compile a full guest list for tomorrow. Emails, phone numbers, social media handles, everything. Are you okay? She asked. Perfect, I said, meaning it for the first time in days. Next, I called Priya in New York. I need you at St. Michael's Cathedral tomorrow with your camera and press credentials. Something newsworthy is going to happen. Priya was terrified, but she agreed. Finally, I called my father. Dad, I love you. No matter what happens tomorrow, remember that. He reassured me, but I could hear worry in his voice. Dawn found me in my hotel bathrobe, coffee in hand, watching DC glow in gold and pink. In 6 hours, I was supposed to become Mrs. Reed. Instead, I would become something more powerful, a woman who refused to be anyone's fool. At 9 a.m., I showered away the last traces of the old Celeste. By 11:30, I was in the bridal prep room, at St. Michael's, surrounded by Kathleen and my bridesmaids. My mother's sweet, "Good morning, beautiful bride." Texts lay unanswered on my phone. I knew exactly where she was. Tracking Nathaniel's phone on our shared plan showed he'd spent the night at our family home. At 11:45, my father arrived. Handsome, dignified, silver-haired. I embraced him. Dad, I need to tell you something before we walk down the aisle. I handed him the notebook. He read, face draining of color, hands trembling. How long have you known? He whispered. Since yesterday. He paused, then nodded. He offered me his arm, and we walked toward the sanctuary doors together. Inside, the cathedral gleamed with white roses and peonies, the string quartet tuning up. My mother sat radiant, completely oblivious. As the bridal march swelled and I stepped into the aisle, 200 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Nathaniel's smile faltered. My mother dabbed at her eyes as if she were the picture of maternal devotion. When we reached the altar, Pastor Jenkins began the service in his measured voice. I let him speak through the vows, the script Nathaniel and Diana had so insistently chosen for me. Then came the moment of truth. Celeste, Pastor. Jenkins said, "Do you take Nathaniel?" I stepped away from Nathaniel, brushed past him to the microphone, and said, "Actually, I have something to say first." Instantly, silence fell. He froze. My mother gasped. 200 faces turned from celebration to shock. I just realized that before I make the biggest promise of my life, I should be completely honest about everything. Yesterday, I discovered that my fiancé and my mother have been having an affair. A bomb went off in the cathedral. Gasps, a dropped program, the color draining from Judge Reed's face. Diana stood, panic on her face. "Sit down, Diana," my father commanded. Nathaniel tried to stem the tide. "Everyone, there's been a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I asked loudly. "That you used our joint credit card to buy wine for my mother? That you spent last night at my parents' house?" Judge Reed rose, horror on his face. "Nathaniel, tell me this isn't true." His son stammered, offering no defense. I turned back to the congregation. "This isn't about revenge. It's about truth. Truth before any of us pretend a fairy tale when there are lies beneath." With that, I slipped down the aisle, kissing my father's forehead as I passed. "You did the right thing," he whispered. I walked out through the cathedral doors into the October afternoon, my wedding dress trailing behind me like battle armor. A few moments later, Priya's footage hit local news. By evening, Nar's wedding revenge was trending nationwide. Judge Reed's firm announced Nathaniel would take indefinite leave. Victoria Reed sent me a couriered letter expressing admiration for my courage. My mother was quietly ousted from her charity boards. Our congregation rallied around my father as he announced his resignation. 6 months later, I was in Alexandria, Virginia, with a fresh job in New York, cherry blossoms in bloom. My mother's calls went unanswered. Nathaniel's lawyer reached out. I told them the only way he could make amends was to leave me alone forever. 1 year later, I delivered the keynote at the National Women's Literature Conference, The Power of Authentic Voice, and spoke of choosing truth over comfort. Women approached me afterward, sharing their own stories of betrayal and thanking me for the courage to choose themselves. Sometimes the greatest revenge is not destruction, but liberation. Sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is choose herself when everyone else expects her to choose silence. And sometimes the best happily ever after is not the one you planned, but the one you create when you finally learn to value your own truth above everyone else's comfort.